I don't know if anyone's like really looked into that, how problematic that could really be, but to me that stands out as not just a red flag on the formulation itself and the lack of efficacy for its intended purpose of what it's being marketed towards, but in addition to that, the potential exacerbation of even like, I don't know, health issues. What's up guys, Derek, moreplates.com. Today we are talking about Prime hydration, revisiting the globally exploding hydration formula that has, taken the, I don't know, what is it, like 8 to 16-year-old demographic by storm. No, I'm just kidding. Sort of kidding. But this company is very appealing to the younger demographic and essentially is a pseudo hydration formula, which we'll get into shortly. But I made a video elucidating, their marketing claims, their formulations in comparison to other hydration formulas in the industry. And ultimately my, main criticism of them wasn't even necessarily that the product is bad. It's more so that it's completely misrepresented and marketed in a way that I believe is incredibly misleading, especially when it is stacked up against other formulas that are actually going to be supportive of performance and adequate hydration. So, putting it up against a liquid IV or Elements or whatever, and then claiming you're the shit because of like cherry-picked, terrible comparative like factoids of your product. It's it rubbed me the wrong way, frankly, and that you can kind of tell in my sentiment in the video. But I don't know why they do that. Like, this shit seemingly sells itself for them, very successful, and they don't need to put themselves up against these other products that, actual athletes should be using, and stick to marketing to kids, probably, to be honest, because that is their main demo. But they insist on, pushing into the actual competitive sports arena and pro sports, which is interesting because I think it's going to lead to a lot of people using a product that is intentionally inferior, that appeals to a younger demographic solely based on taste and hype rather than actual efficacy, but then leveraging the like competitive pro athletes to do it who won't even be using it, which is fucking wild to see. They had a new signing today or the other day. The first official Prime athletes. Welcome to the family, Stylebender and Alexander Volkanovski.
Israel Adesanya, one of the best strikers in UFC history.
I'm a big fan of Adesanya.
Alexander Volkanovski. Yeah. He's such a good fighter and like entertainer.
Alexander the Great! Logan Paul, sponsor athlete from the UFC, fool! The undisputed king of the middleweights!
Volkanovski's teeing off on him.
Yeah. Is he, bro? Get the out of here.
So these guys are both legends in the sport, incredible fighters, and at the top of their game. And, Logan's a fan of them, KSI's a fan of them, and they deem it appropriate to market. Well, they're already a part of the UFC. They're like the go-to, they're the hydration formula of the UFC right now, which is kind of mind-blowing. Like, they have this thing, it's like the hydration corner is what they call it or something, which is like comically paradoxical for what this thing is. But anyways, they have sponsored two like premier great athletes who are front running, guys in the UFC. And this is the most enthusiastic face ever. Not sarcastic either. Like, this guy is like fucking selling it, bro. Their comment section is not the most overwhelmingly supportive. Like, here we have Izzy posting, "In my prime," in like some of the top comments, "As a huge fan of yours for almost a decade now, this is the worst and most frustrating thing I've seen you do. Associating with those scum Pauls and KSI is dangerous, bro. I don't know how you cannot see that they're sellouts and do or say anything, including completely switching up their stance for money to keep their fame and channel. See, when they almost got canceled, both of them cried and apologized over and over. and now say completely different things to what they did. Not to mention what a crap drink to promote. And it's only a thing because of their name anyways. It's not quality. If anyone else made that exact drink, they wouldn't sell a single case. These dudes will completely flip their sentiment on you, bro, as soon as something comes out or people try to get on your ass for shit like they have before or try to cancel you. Guaranteed these aren't the men you want standing behind you. Dude has a track record. Such a shame. Ah, well. Just keep them douches off the page as much as possible. Shake my head. Come on, man. Such a big fan of you and you're a part of this company. Using artificial sugars and stuff that's more harmful than real sugar. Read the ingredients, people. The stuff in it and Google it. The shit's bad for you. You might as well drink Red Bull. Izzy, you hate Monster Energy. Wish you didn't sell out on this deal. I am unfollowing you for marketing these weasels. I respectfully disagree with you endorsing the Ball family. I don't know what was said behind closed doors, but the way I view them, I don't support them. I fully understand your decision based on what's good for yourself and loved ones, but I believe you could endorse another brand that's, again, in my view, more impactful and a positive light on God's green earth. Bro, their product has a mass amount of people reporting mold in the bottles. Get as far away from this product as you can. Fire emoji. Let's fucking go by Prime. Yeah, there's obviously support there, but it's shockingly, I don't know, is it shocking? Somewhat negative. In the Volkanovski post, let's see. Yeah, the guys who needed it least. Best believe they are not drinking that for hydration. Wouldn't a pro performer rather have electrolytes come from sodium instead of potassium? Bro got the champs as partners. Crazy. Fire emoji times 4. Come at me, bro. Newsman Manza, 94. Major. Fucking win, bro. So, like I said, they became the sponsor of the UFC, strike a big money deal for 2023. I could cry. He blinded me with science. This was back in January. Prime just became the official sports drink of the UFC. Logan signing. And Dana White, yeah, looking stoked, bro. And awesome accomplishment from a business perspective, by the way, but it's interesting, the marketing angles and stuff that I just like, I can't get on board with how they spin this shit, unfortunately. Prime hydration recovery zones. From now on, the corners where fighters sit between rounds will be known as quote unquote prime hydration recovery zones. And you know, I would be shocked, bro. Find a clip of a guy mid-fight actually chugging one of these things that isn't for the camera. Like, I guess maybe they do for the camera, but I mean, find them in practice, just like fucking taking this as a means of hydrating themselves adequately. I think what is hydration is getting totally overlooked when it comes to the marketing of this brand, whereby it should just be marketed as like a fucking good tasting potassium coconut water drink. Like that's it, bro. At the end of the day, like, to completely steer in the direction of emphasizing professional athletes, competitive sports, UFC fighters who sweat out tons of electrolytes on every single practice during the match, etc. Like, these are athletes that need real shit, not this prime stuff. And it's wild to me how many guys are, like, how many people are going to get behind it that otherwise would never use it. It's going to be interesting to see. So they also sponsored Arsenal, by the way. This was back in mid last year. So sponsoring a football club that, again, an endurance related, competitive sport. Is there going to be, athletes in the middle of their match, sipping on Prime to rehydrate? No, they're not, unless they're fucking dumping salt in the bottle at the end of the day. So kudos to them, though, by the way. Like, amazing business accomplishments. These are like big moves they're making too. After my first video, by the way, Prime hasn't stopped reaching out to me, and they're fucking chill about it too, and just super enthusiastic and funny as hell. I can't tell if they hate me or not, but I get messages like this still. Prime all day, every day, fucking fire emoji, and offering to send me shit still. I will, by the way, review their energy drink if you want me to. I think that is should be on my to-do list. But anyways, getting back to hydration, like, what is this thing at the end of the day, or what is it supposed to be? Let's talk about the definition of hydration. This is, noun, hydration, the process of causing something to absorb water. For example, the human body requires adequate hydration to function properly. So considerate of what the definition of hydration actually is this actually a hydration formula that competitive athletes, pro sports athletes are going to be using for peak performance? Let's look at what electrolytes need to accomplish and prioritizing as well. Like, how do I facilitate these actions with a well-balanced electrolyte formula? So nervous system function, muscle function as well, modulating pH levels, but also like the main thing, particularly with sodium, which is entirely negligent in this formula, it's going to help maintain fluid balance in cells through something called osmosis. And when you have a satisfactory amount of, potassium, calcium, magnesium, like these are critical electrolytes to have in balance in your system as well. But sodium chloride, this is something that is the most important and goes entirely overlooked in this formula, which is a clear emphasis on the direction in which they deem most valuable to lean into, which is fine. It's just not representative of what they're doing with their marketing really at all. Like, they are appealing to the 10-year-old who wants something that tastes great, is a fan of Logan Paul and KSI or whatever, or idolizes certain pro athletes at this point if they're leaning into like UFC athletes specifically and whatnot, or professional football players or what have you. But it's like, to put this kind of a formula in front of people's faces as the go-to hydration formula that's taken the world by storm, and even the top of the top athletes are endorsing it heavily, like, you are going to be getting some actually like competitive people that otherwise are looking for that edge and need to stay hydrated, deferring to this product over stuff that is actually effective because they're, fill in the blank, actual, adult appealing professional athlete is using it, or supposedly, and endorsing it, like an Israel Adesanya. So this is where it gets kind of finicky, because it's like, when these guys are sweating, like, they are fucking sweating, bro. And the proportion of electrolytes that is in that sweat is not representative of what is in the formula of Prime itself. Like, you would think, okay, well, if this is such a amazing electrolyte formula, then presumably the composition of sweat would be like predominantly like obscenely in favor of potassium, and then there would be like no sodium, and there would be, nothing else essentially. It would just be potassium that you're sweating out, which just isn't the case. When you look at the composition of sweat, you're looking at majorly sodium chloride. This is going to be the thing that is predominantly coming out in your sweat, and to a lesser extent you have potassium being featured, and then to an even lesser extent magnesium, calcium. But the proportions of them, like, you're looking at like, I don't know, upwards of a gram of sodium per liter of sweat you actually sweat out, if not more. Like, you could be upwards of like, I think the top end is like 1850 or something. And that's like, based on literature, but like, you can be upwards of like 1 to 2 grams of sodium per liter lost of sweat. And you can just imagine, if you are rehydrating with an electrolyte formula that literally has, if I recall correctly, like 10 milligrams of sodium, how close are you at actually replacing what you are sweating out and hydrating yourself adequately? It's just not at all. Like, this is the most critical component of an electrolyte formula that is entirely overlooked. And again, like I mentioned, the way you can tell that they prioritize the youth appeal and the marketing tactics is that they are intentionally making it taste as tolerable as possible by depriving it of any salt. It is not that difficult to create like a reasonably effective electrolyte formula. Like, yeah, there's some nuance in terms of the proportions and whatnot, and what applications it's going to be used in. Is there going to be sugar or not in it, etc., etc. But like, you can discern with fairly reasonably accurately what a company is shooting for based on the formula. And when you see a entirely deficient sodium hydration formula, you know that the angle is it's going to taste good. So when a young kid, or somebody who is otherwise could be, I don't know, marketed to and like actually wants to try this stuff out to either feel healthier because they think they're doing something good for their performance, or because they just want something that tastes good and is also, a healthy substitute for, something else, whatever. Like, those individuals drinking it, the likelihood is higher that you are going to get them to like it because it's not going to taste like salt water. So again, the more effective of a formula you have, the more salty it's going to taste. And that, comically was a criticism from Logan of other companies in the industry that have salty tasting products.
And now for the taste test. Liquid IV it's not bad, but it is a little salty.
So it's not bad because there's sugar in it, but it is salty. Maybe because there's half a fucking gram of sodium per serving. Like, I don't know.
But Prime's delicious.
But that is the point. Like, yeah, you can mask it to some extent with, depending on the gravity of sweetener you want to use. But for them, like, the reason it doesn't taste salty is because there's literally no fucking sodium, which is fine. It's just a matter of actually representing it accurately, which is not represented accurately when you have a, hydration formula marketed for athletes, marketed for football players, marketed for UFC fighters. Like, how many UFC fighters are going to be actually using this in their training? How many are going to be using it, like, not just for show, in competition? Like, ultimately, it is going to be something you would literally need to take a fucking salt packet with you and, like, dump it into your shit in order to have it be efficacious during your training or whatever. Like, you're going to have to bring an electrolyte formula to fill into your electrolyte formula to make it work properly. And another thing I didn't really highlight specifically in the first video either that I feel is worth mentioning is, aside from the the marketing tactics, the whatever, like, is this going to be something UFC athletes are really, like, seriously using in training? Not really, and that's totally fine as long as it's, understood and, like, people aren't fucking up their performance to, like, drinking this stuff thinking that it's going to be helping them. And in reality, you might otherwise be not only selling yourself short, but in addition to that, I was digging into some hyperkalemia research, and it's interesting in that this thing is so heavily in favor of potassium that I was checking if there was any literature on incidents of hyperkalemia induced by, like, salt substitutes. Like, for example, you can get potassium salt that substitutes as, like, actual table salt to salt your foods with. Some people do that as a way to, like, control their blood pressure. And, obviously you can get into the, the balancing of electrolytes and how impactful sodium is actually going to be on your blood pressure at the end of the day, et cetera, et cetera. But it's besides the point. At the end of the day, there's a lot of people that are substituting table salt for potassium salt. In addition, there are people that are supplementing with potassium separately. And then now there are people that are going to be drinking huge amounts of Prime hydration, thinking that they are being healthy, hydrating themselves, and athletes that are sweating their fucking balls off, losing liters and liters of fluid with a ton of sodium being excreted and only rehydrating with potassium. And I was wondering, like, it's very difficult to actually become hyperkalemic if you have healthy kidneys, etc., and things are on point. But when you have compromised organ function, or you're on certain medications like angiotensin receptor blockers or ACE inhibitors, there are certain situations in which it's not unheard of to think that somebody that is only rehydrating or drinking excessive amounts of this stuff because they think it is, healthy and they just like the taste of it or whatever, like, putting yourself into a position where you could otherwise be causing, like, a fucking arrhythmia or something, like actually getting into a imbalanced situation where you have such a high proportion of potassium in your system relative to sodium. Because again, if you are convinced you are rehydrating yourself adequately and you're just letting yourself sweat buckets, but you're only rehydrating with potassium enriched water, essentially with sucralose in it, like, you are not just not rehydrating, but you are pushing your proportion of potassium to sodium even further in the wrong direction. So I was looking at some literature, and fortunately, it seems pretty difficult to actually achieve, like, the risk of hyperkalemia from, potassium supplementation or salt substitutes is, difficult to say the least, except for unique circumstances. But it's not unheard of, and I felt it was worth highlighting because this is something that I would, want to fucking know if I'm going to be slamming this stuff every day as a, like, very, very sweaty athlete who is, like, losing electrolytes, by the buckets, essentially. So this is a review called Potassium Enriched Salt Substitutes as a Means to Lower Blood Pressure. And in here they mention the risks of potassium enriched salt substitutes include a possible risk increased risk of hyperkalemia, and its principal adverse consequences, arrhythmias and sudden cardiac death, especially in people with conditions that impair potassium excretion, such as chronic kidney disease. There is insufficient evidence regarding the effects of potassium-enriched salt substitutes on the occurrence of hyperkalemia. There is a need for additional empirical research on the effect of increasing dietary potassium and potassium-enriched salt substitutes on serum potassium levels and the risk of hyperkalemia, as well as for robust estimation of population-wide impact of replacing sodium chloride with potassium-enriched salt substitutes. And getting into some of these studies, like, you know, there's not a ton of them, but I found some that were quite interesting. Cardiac arrest due to oral potassium administration. Oral administration of potassium may produce severe cardiac toxicity in patients with heart disease, even when renal function is clinically normal. Another one was a 29-year-old woman suffered a cardiac arrest due to profound hyperkalemia caused by the use of a potassium-containing salt substitute. She was resuscitated, but post-hypoxic brain damage occurred. Another one, fatal hyperkalemia from a salt substitute. Again, these are not common necessarily, but some of these are interesting because some of them are in individuals that otherwise aren't intaking that much, but also aren't individuals that are excessively sweating and exposing themselves to competitive sport-like environments where they're sweating by the gallon. So some of these individuals have predispositions or health issues as is, but then there are some that have seemingly just like overdone the potassium. And I'm just thinking, as a professional athlete, not only are you compromising the performance you could otherwise be getting by adequate sodium chloride ingestion concurrently with your potassium, calcium, magnesium, etc., but in addition to that, you may be putting yourself in this weird mismatched, imbalanced scenario where you are not only driving your performance down, but you're potentially putting yourself in a compromised, like, cardiac risk territory, to be honest, like an acute event that could occur just by sweating your ass off and then pushing your potassium intake through the sky. Because I don't know how much people are going to be slamming this stuff, and I don't know how many people are going to take the marketing as a perception of adequate hydration can be achieved through this. Here's professional athletes that are doing it. Do as we do, and you will achieve, you know, the best outcome in your performance endeavors. It's not going to work like that, though. And I think it should be highlighted appropriately, frankly, that this is ultimately potassium enriched sucralose, good tasting, you know, young gen appealing water, but that's the extent of it. And the use in an athletic context, in like a professional sport especially, is suboptimal performance and potentially even danger territory. You know, that might be a harsh extrapolation, but there's some more literature that we'll get into now. Life-threatening hyperkalemia in a patient with normal renal function. So this individual had, you know, normal kidney parameters. We described the pathophysiology of the disruption in potassium homeostasis and emphasized the importance of dietary history and educating high-risk patients to avoid salt substitutes. So this was the case of, again, an elderly female, not like a young high-level athlete, but notable because they had normal renal function. Now again, they were diabetic and were using an angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitor and beta blocker. And the conclusion was this patient's critical hyperkalemia was likely multifactorial, but mainly related to an unintended high potassium intake from the salt substitute that overwhelmed the potassium excretion ability of the kidneys in the setting of multiple risk factors for developing hyperkalemia. Here's another, probably even more relevant one: death by coconut. Coconut water, and the reason I say relevant is because the coconut water content is such a big component of the Prime hydration product. It's 10% coconut water, and the potassium content largely going to be derived from that component of it, having the 700 milligrams per serving. And in this, we have somebody who is basically in a state of hyperkalemia from their coconut water ingestion. So here, coconut water has become an increasingly popular sports drink because of its natural ingredients, electrolytes, and mineral content. Marketing is focused on the product's low levels of fat, calories, and carbs while promoting health benefits that are as of yet unproven. Coconut water, when consumed in excess, has been noted in case reports to cause severe hyperkalemia. We present a case of a 42-year-old otherwise healthy man who presented to our emergency department following an episode of exertional syncope after consuming multiple servings of coconut water. A 42-year-old black man without any medical history presented to our hospital after a syncopal episode. He was playing tennis outdoors all day in temperatures in excess of 90 degrees Fahrenheit. He reported drinking a total of 8 11-ounce bottles of coconut water throughout the day. He experienced the sudden onset of lightheadedness and was witnessed to have lost consciousness. He did not experience any significant head trauma and regained consciousness almost immediately. Afterward, he complained of generalized weakness and lightheadedness. He was brought to the emergency department by ambulance. There he was noted to have a blood pressure of 67 or over 45, a regular pulse in the 50s, and a temperature of 36.3 degrees Celsius. Here we can see his ECG results, sinus arrest with a junctional escape rhythm at a rate of 51 beats per minute. Let's see. He was admitted to the cardiac care unit for rhabdomyolysis. I always have a hard time saying that. Acute kidney injury and hyperkalemia. He was aggressively rehydrated with intravenous fluids. The hyperkalemia was treated with calcium gluconate, albuterol sulfate by nebulizer, sodium polystyrene sulfonate, and intravenous dextrose and insulin. During his hospital stay, he remained in normal sinus rhythm without any further significant arrhythmic or hemodynamic events. His potassium downtrended to normal levels and his renal function improved. He was discharged in stable condition on day 3 with close follow-up planned with his primary physician and cardiologist. He was also instructed to avoid coconut water, remain well hydrated, and avoid excessive exercise in the extreme heat. Notice the two paradoxical things. Avoid coconut water, remain well hydrated. Yeah. When consumed in excess, coconut water has been, and I say that because this is like literally what they would tell you in the marketing material is how to stay hydrated is drink this, which, you know, ironically is what got him to this spot. When consumed in excess, of course, but when consumed in excess, coconut water has been shown in case reports to cause severe hyperkalemia. 8 ounces of coconut water contains roughly 600 milligrams of potassium. Suggested adequate daily intake for an adult without chronic kidney disease, 4.7 grams per day. Our patient who drank 8 servings of coconut water within a short period of time would have ingested roughly 5.5 grams of potassium. In combination with acute kidney injury and rhabdo, his potassium level was life-threatening. Our case demonstrates the potential dangers associated with excessive consumption of potassium-rich coconut water. To our knowledge, this is the first reported case of a life-threatening bradyarrhythmia associated with the use of coconut water. Patients who consume such beverages, especially those with renal impairment, should be advised of the potential dangers associated with drinking unrestricted volumes. So for this one, it looks like each serving that he had was roughly 600 milligrams of potassium, and the prime drink is actually 700. So yeah, for somebody excessively sweating and is only drinking these to rehydrate during training or whatever, which presumably a lot of people will be, going through a couple liters of this stuff at least, like I could see is like fairly commonplace. And then some individuals that are outliers may be going through like multiple liters of this stuff on a daily basis for like really intense long training sessions, or just like because they really like this stuff. You know, that is definitely notable. You know, these milligram amounts are somewhat comparable. In another case report, life-threatening hyperkalemia from nutritional supplements, uncommon or undiagnosed. Conclusion, clinicians should be vigilant in monitoring potassium intake from over-the-counter supplements. And that brings us to, you know, summary of approved therapy options for hyperkalemia. And we have, you know, things that would ultimately, I'm not saying like do any of this stuff obviously, but could result in a clinical emergency that requires immediate treatments. And some of the treatment options are IV calcium, insulin, a beta-2 receptor agonist, interestingly, furosemide, sodium polystyrene sulfonate, and this one is pataromer. I don't know about that one. That's the only one I've never heard of. But anyways, this is something that when I was seeing, you know, looking at the approved therapy options for hyperkalemia, I started to, like, wheels started turning a little bit as to, okay, not only is this thing just going to, like, worst case scenario is you're just not hydrating adequately and you're going to have a unnecessary suffering of your performance when you could have otherwise just used something effective if you didn't get like misled by marketing tactics saying that the shit's better than fucking Liquid IV and like other companies that are actually putting sodium in their products. But in addition to that, I was like, wait, if this stuff is required to drive down potassium levels and create like a balancing act of sorts, like is there a situation in which there is like a counterbalance whereby like the higher the sodium, the more potassium you can essentially like get away with, so to speak. And that's kind of where I found this paper, Sodium Restriction as a Cause of Hyperkalemia. So this is a case report with a 68-year-old male cardiologist presenting to nephrology for evaluation of persistent hyperkalemia for more than 5 years. He notes his potassium levels have ranged from 5 to 6.1. By the way, if you don't know, I probably should have said by now, hyperkalemia, if you don't know, is defined as a serum or plasma potassium level above the upper limits of normal. So this would be like on your blood work, for example, you would see a potassium level greater than 5 to 5.5. And mild hyperkalemia is usually asymptomatic, but high potassium levels can cause cardiac arrhythmias, muscle weakness, paralysis, and obviously there is some level whereby even if you haven't gotten to the point where you literally have an arrhythmia or, you know, like blatant muscle weakness, like there's a spectrum by which your electrolyte balance would not be supporting adequate function, performance, hydration, etc. So it's not like there's a threshold by boom, all of a sudden now you're at like muscle weakness territory and everything below that you were fine. Like there's a spectrum by which the higher the imbalances of potassium relative to actual sodium content and the other electrolytes, like the less favorable things are going to be from a fluid dynamics perspective. So getting back to the case report, he notes his potassium levels have ranged from 5 to 6.1. He has been followed by a community nephrologist since the abnormality was first noted on a routine chemistry panel 5 years ago. His prior workup included normal levels of aldosterone and renin. He has never taken an ACE inhibitor and does not use non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. The glomerular filtration rate, persistently in the range of 72 to 81. Outside, urinary sodium levels were consistently below 20. When pressed about his diet, he reported being followed by a dietitian quite closely and that he was well versed about foods high in potassium, which he has been consciously avoiding. He also stated he is on a very rigid sodium restriction at approximately 500 milligrams to 1 gram daily. The patient emphasizes this diet has adversely affected his overall nutrition, that he has lost about 15 to 20 pounds in the past 5 years. He has been taking daily Kayexolate, which resulted in chronic diarrhea to control his potassium levels. He denies taking any herbal medications or over-the-counter supplements. So this guy, hyperkalemia it's like chronic, and he restricts sodium aggressively. So they were suspicious that the hyperkalemia may be secondary to severe dietary sodium restriction. Therefore, to test this hypothesis, we had the patient increase his sodium intake in a stepwise manner, initially from 1 gram per day, then increasing by 1 gram per day each week with weekly potassium checks. Now, interestingly, the serum potassium levels progressively decreased as the sodium intake increased. So here we see 500, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and serum potassium levels just dropping precipitously, inversely with the sodium going up. So it's clear that there is some sort of like push-pull, scenario here, or a seesaw effect of sorts, whereby it's not just that you are having a extreme amount of potassium relative to no sodium and you're sweating out all your sodium essentially, like proportionally so, excessively more sodium than potassium. But in addition, trying to rehydrate with just potassium, you may otherwise be exacerbating an imbalance even further and impeding your performance above and beyond. Like maybe, is it even like, it might be fathomable that you might actually be fucking yourself up more than if you just like drank straight water. Like who's to say, like individuals who are sweating gallons out, like individuals who are in like a very, very intense combat sports with long rounds, sweating their asses off, or football players that are running up and down the field for hours and are sweating hard, liters and liters and liters with tons of sodium lost, and to think that you were only going to get that back through your food intake later, but you otherwise thought you were hitting the mark by taking in your prime, all practice long or all training session long, and then before and after, and I've been on top of my hydration, I'm drinking tons of this shit, so I don't need to worry about, aggressively salting my foods to the point that it's almost inedible. like this is the kind of thing whereby I'm wondering, you know, are athletes potentially fucking themselves up by using this stuff? Like, you are getting to a point where you are misled into thinking you're drinking something supportive of hydration, performance, adequate health even, and you are otherwise exacerbating a sodium deficiency caused by significant sweating in sports. So for this to be like highlighted and emphasized as the like pro athlete, and in two like heavily endurance relying sports too, nonetheless, which is fucking crazy to me, with the most sweating, really, like so much fucking sweating, and to assert like this is the thing you want, it would fucking suck to find out as an athlete too that you started taking this stuff in excess because, or you switched from like a reputable brand to this because this is the new hyped up thing because you saw Izzy Adesanya like endorsing the fuck out of it or whatever. And all of a sudden your performance is like on the downswing, or you end up in a state of hyperkalemia, which, you know, is it rare? For sure. Is it unheard of to happen? Like, I don't actually know, but having something that is literally just potassium and nothing else essentially by the multiple, you know, liters per day as my form of rehydration, and I'm just exacerbating an imbalance further, like, sketchy stuff, dude. So I don't know if anyone's like really looked into that, how problematic that could really be, but to me that stands out as not just a red flag on the formulation itself and the lack of efficacy for its intended purpose of what it's being marketed towards, but in addition to that, the potential exacerbation of even like, I don't know, health issues. Like, it's fucking wild. So I don't know what went into the thought of this other than like the potassium content I feel like could have been lower relative to everything else. But again, like I get it, you know, the coconut water, it was something that had I imagine the, you know, the marketing buzzwords help a lot. Like, you know, the BCAAs, bro, that's another one that is like, you know, essentially fucking useless in this formula. But anyways, you know, the sodium, ultimately, it was the play to get, you know, the kids into it, and it worked for sure. But if you're an actual sweating person who uses this stuff, just be mindful that the purpose in which this stuff has efficacy would be as a supplement to your daily diet in spite of any competitive efforts at all. Like, if you're somebody who just sits at a desk, is chilling, wants something good to taste, like good to sip on, that is, you know, low in calories, low in sugar, is artificially sweetened, could otherwise help you hit your potassium intake, because again, it's not like everyone is hitting their potassium intake each day, you know, could be a great, reasonable option. However, for people actually competing in sports, UFC fighters, football players, any sport essentially, not going to be the move. Like, get an actual sodium rich formula and deal with a bit of saltiness, because that is where the efficacy lies, and that is how you're going to get the most bang for your buck. Like, the outcome on deterioration to performance by being dehydrated is so dramatic that it would be I don't know, like I wonder how much money is thrown at these guys to like endorse it as if this is the go-to drink for, you know, a fighter, or if they would say otherwise. Like, I don't really know like what clauses go into something like this, or if they even know, but like I can assure you in their training camp, you know, unless they're dumping fucking salt packets in the bottles, like this is not what they're going for. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Let me know if you want me to dive into reviewing this next. They actually did send me this. I did reply to their DM. They were so gracious as to send me a package, which again, awesome marketing, you know, cool brand, you know, awareness. The shit they're doing is working. It's just the, like I said, the misalignment of where they are steering it is, you know, misleading and potentially even detrimental to some people's career performance. Like, I hope nobody sees this shit in a professional sport and thinks like this is what I gotta use because fill in the blank pro athlete or fucking Logan Paul told me about it. So anyways, let me know what like I said, what you guys think. If you want me to review this, I will. Most people, by the way, who watch this video, I don't think are subscribed. So if you want to, you know, keep in the loop on when I drop this review, subscribe, and also it just tells the YouTube algorithm that, you know, this is a video you were interested in, you know, other people might find interest in it too, etc. Just like liking and commenting helps. Also subscribing, you know, keeps you in the loop with what I'm doing, and also tells YouTube this is a a good vid. So I think it's like 50-50 who watch my videos who aren't subscribed or something. It shows in Creator Studio, but we got to get that ratio up. I don't know what a good ratio is, but I would like to get it up. So if you could subscribe as well, much appreciated. Follow me on other social media if you're there as well. If you want to support me, anything in the video description, it's all down there. And until next time, talk to you guys soon.